Hello, people of the internet, my name is JD Shadow. With the announcement this past Tuesday of a new Metroid title, Metroid Dread, one that has been seemingly in development longer than Duke Nukem Forever, hopefully one will assume Dread won't follow the fate that DKF had, and with the slated release of this coming October being announced at their E3 showcase video, Nintendo is banking on this title to quench what has been a drought of decent Metroid titles, as we haven't had a new game in around 10 or so years. Remember that Samus Returns is a remake of the classic Game Boy game Metroid 2 Return of Samus, thus this is a remake and not a new title. And notice that I had said 10 years, because if you check Nintendo's language, they seem to want to forget about certain games in the Metroid series. One is the much aligned Federation Force, which seems to be the game many have not only forgotten about, but have said was the most unnecessary game in the franchise. And personally, that game can go to a deep dark place and stay there. They thankfully haven't forgotten about Metroid Prime 4, which has become in a bit of a developmental hell since it was first announced, with the only updates that we've had about it that they are still working on it. No gameplay or even a trailer exists for it to our knowledge, only an acknowledgement of that it still exists, and they haven't canceled it yet. But there is another game that Nintendo is currently leaving out of the discussion when they are talking about the new Metroid titles not being there for a long time. That is one that if you are a Metroid fan to go on any fan board or subreddit or any Discord server, you will no doubt get bombarded with countless comments about how the game sucks, yet they may not have even played it. Yeah, we are talking about Other M. This game, right when the game was first announced at E3 2011, got major heat because of, wouldn't you believe it, a talking Samus. Samus is supposed to be a silent protagonist, they all said. Or rather, those that only grew up with the Prime series and forgot that Samus had lines of dialogue in all the Metroid games except for Prime. Even the first Metroid had Samus congratulating the player for completing the game, and revealed herself to those people who completed it quickly. Either that, or they were so spoiled by the Prime series that they thought those should have been the standard for every Metroid game following it, which was not to be the case. And notice that I'm leaving out the people who are just trolling just for the sake of doing so. And then the game came out, and here came the initial complaints about Samus' voice acting not being up to par. The story was whacked. Samus was completely out of character. The characterization destroys Samus on the account of it not being her and or being misogynistic. Adam was a complete D-bag, and the authorization system didn't make any sense. Ridley, PTSD, the Hell Run, Sector Zero. Holy hell! But the interesting thing that since then, for a game that was so awful and so out of touch with the Metroid tradition, you cannot look at a Metroid subreddit or board not seeing someone mention the game to the rate of once per day. Think of it, for a game so maligned that people believe it should never be talked about again, they do a horrible job of letting you forget its existence. Nor do they leave you alone if you reveal that you enjoy any part of the game. Even stuff they didn't condemn, such as the controls, or the music, or the boss fights, or the ninja Gaiden X mechanics, or the exploring you could actually do, or the side characters. And if you even dared to challenge them on if the story was okay, or the offending scenes were not offending. If you had fun with the game, be ready for an onslaught of madness and a mob coming after you. I get people having strong feelings about a title and being not up to expectations, but at least we still understood that it is just a game. Some of the people in these circles though, that hate the very code that Other M was built upon, get borderline toxic, to the point that I have to wonder if they got the lessons for Reset Era, or if I'm reading something for Reset Era. But if you want to know the most ironic thing, those that hate the game today have probably never actually played the game. I actually try to find a copy of the game and a Wii or Wii U to play it on. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get a Wii U these days without spending a ton of money on one because Nintendo forgot how to use their Player's Choice line to lower the prices of any of their games? And by the way, seriously Nintendo, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild should not still be $50 3 years after the initial release. Even Sony in their greedy ways anymore still know how to use their greatest hits label well in this sense. So how on Zebas do you think that those that are still whining that Other M even exists had actually played the game, not just Prime babies that are jumping on a bandwagon that they believe they have to be on to get some karma points of Reddit and some internet points because the internet rewards people for being outlandish or have douchey hot takes. But you know what? I played it. I played Metroid Other M from beginning to end. I only want to find the game on the Wii U again because I had intended on doing a more long form video about this game for some time now, debunking every single argument people have about this game. And yes, Gamefly is your friend. Spot to me, Gamefly. I wanted to get my own footage for this game from beginning to end without having to use someone else's game footage to do so, and might even try the hard mode of the game to see what it's like for myself. But I had played the game when it first came out, and you want to know my take on it? I'm going to do as short of a form as I can. I can't promise anything though, because have you seen the length of some of my videos? But here's the take. This game, Other M, is not awful. The game is actually good. The story is good. Not perfect, but good. The music is some of the best I've heard in a Metroid game in a long time. Some of the bosses really do their job to get your juices going. The hiding places of missile tanks are very clever. The supporting cast, especially one Anthony Higgs, is also great. I can understand why the authorization system exists in the game. And yes, I actually did like Samus' characterization in Other M, and I think it will be a damn crime if Nintendo denounced its existence because of a mad mob that pretends that they played the game and hated it instead of trying to build on what can be a goldmine. And you know what? I don't think I'm a terrible human being, or not a Metroid fan, or misogynist, or anything else for saying that. I don't believe I'm alone in believing that either, and I don't believe those people are any of those things that I listed either. I don't think Nintendo should allow fans of Other M to be disenfranchised. We enjoyed the Metal Gear Solid-like aspects of the storytelling, and enjoyed what it set out to accomplish. It didn't mean we thought the game was perfect, but it deserved to have a lot more good said about it than it gets, and it sure doesn't deserve the blind hate it gets. For instance, do you notice that the critics of the game both believe that Samus didn't show enough emotion in her captain's log-like narration, but thought that she showed too much in the cutscenes? How in the world does that work? Maybe they thought something in the middle might have worked, and that would be a viable argument if it weren't for other aspects, like the captain's log narration being what she told her Galactic Federation superiors, thus needing to sound more professional in those. But how can you hold both those positions at the same time? Especially when you take into account those same people saying that Samus should be silent. Again, those people that say are probably prime babies that seem to forget that Samus spoke in all the other Metroid games in some way. But think of it. In a world where we encourage females to become more empowered, to speak out, be heard, and to be strong while not letting go to past characteristics, we're telling Samus to shut up and fight. Don't speak a word. I don't think this is a message we should be sending to anyone, but this is something that gets said about this game all the time. Especially when Fusion exists and she has extensive dialogue in that game with very little complaints. Of course, we can talk about some other things within Other M to get unfairly maligned. Yes, the authorization system is awkward, but keep in mind that it could be by design. And this did exist in some way in Fusion as well, although we're not complaining about Fusion in any way for it being included there. The Hell Run is something that would make sense in some way, as he was never a dead-end brick wall roadblock for Samus in any of the Metroid games. Though an impassable chasm where space jump is needed to progress any further would be a challenge to that mentality. Oh, by the way, in the latter, she did activate it on her own without anyone telling her she should or could. And don't forget about the sequence breaking that Nintendo didn't want you to do in this game or Metroid Fusion. The best way to tie that into the story is obviously to authorize you to use the powers the devs wanted you to have so you didn't break the sequence of their story. Oh, and by the way, Metroid Fusion's mention of this very thing taking place would like to say hi. The side characters are some of the best supporting cast made for a game, especially Anthony Higgs, who I swear gets too much hate for the princess name he gives Samus. In a way, this is one of his better character traits. It shows personality, and it also shows how much the two trust one another. And for all the hate Samus' characterization gets and the accusation that it's misogynistic, what about Anthony not being a token black character in this game? He behaves like any normal person would under those circumstances while still having unique characteristics to him. That's a character I would love to see them build on more, and I would love to see the relationship that these two have even more so. Even some of the most hardened Other M detractors might be able to agree that this was the best thing to come out of Other M is this character. And if I didn't want to make this video as short as possible, then I would go even more as to why this character is such a goldmine. Of course, the much talked about characterization of Samus comes up, and Sector Zero I can't talk about without raging at what someone would think or feel if someone they cared about was about to sacrifice themselves. but I could save that rage for a more long-form rant about this. But the Ridley scene is special, as it's the first one we heard about when it came to people complaining about the game. But I heard about it and then played the game, that scene, and saw it, and you want to know what I said about it? Was that it? Was that all there was? That's what they're complaining about? You don't want to see what I would have done with the game, because it would scar you for life. The scene just didn't live up to the hype the controversy gave it. I was awaiting and wanted more. Hell, I really wanted to see what the devs could do. But here's the thing, I don't think they could, because I believe the devs developed the game on aging hardware. And this is no joke. Look at some of the compression artifacts on some of the FMV cutscenes in this game. You can tell they had to compress them hard to get them on the disc. Therefore, I doubt they could have done much with that scene than what they did. Compounded more is that the game and much of the series is teen rated. I believe that an M-rated Metroid game and a game where they can really show us the stories that I know they can tell would benefit them, and it would especially benefit them here. However, this also doesn't take into account the idea that PTSD can really manifest itself in people in weird ways. Yes, a situation that PTSD can lay dormant in someone and then become apparent much later for a trigger didn't do anything before can indeed happen. Keep in mind that PTSD is still a mental disorder with a lot of research to be done about it. Mental illness as it is a very finicky subject as it is, but to add in a specific illness that needs more research to be done about it, and you're left with a subject that is well worth tackling. And if the devs had any more time and space to tell the story, it would actually really scar the player for life, as I said before, because of what they would be seeing. Not to mention that PTSD is not confined to fear of that trigger. It could be anger for that trigger, and a sense of losing control of that rage. If you actually look at the manga that the scene seems to reference, Samus is definitely losing some control during her training, but it isn't fear, but rather a sense of anger and rage. This factor in with the amount of mileage that her missions have put onto both her body and her psyche could cause her to have a number of problems. And again, I'm not going to go into them here because I want to keep this as short as possible for when I ever get to doing that more long form video of this game that I've been wanting to do for some time. I do believe though that this scene did need more, and that is part of why I don't think the game is perfect. Outside the pixel hunch, which I think even the biggest Other M fandom member will say can go straight to a flaming pit, it was too short of a campaign and too easy of one. I do feel like I could have completed it in a day, and if I played it a second, third, or fourth time, I could have. It didn't really give me much of a challenge. The leader subplot didn't really lead anywhere either. I wish more emphasis was put on that mole storyline, and the final boss fight was, I'll admit, anticlimactic. However, those are small complaints. The cloning conspiracy storyline I thought was a terrific idea, and I hope it will get examined in future games, alongside the commanding officer that was shown in the final scenes of that game being examined more, because I think it could become a great villain, and a corrupt GF is something I would love for them to expand upon. Samus's battle-torn psyche could also be examined. We've been with her for a while now, so perhaps we can see that the wars she's a part of are starting to take their toll on her and can destroy her the more she pushes on. Even tough, badass warriors can have the moments, just as Solid Snake. Also, for all of the complaints that Samus's characterization has got, you cannot deny that Jessica Martin, who was the voice of Samus in Other M, delivered on the performance, and it's a damn shame the game got mobbed like it did and they came after Jessica the way they did. Her performance showed that she had the passion to become that voice, and some of her other work, provided you can find it now online, I'm not sure if you still can or not, is really telling she deserved a lot more praise than she got. Assuming you can find it, go look up her For Patrick video, her short film that she made shortly after Other M came out. Here's hoping she is called upon to make her return somewhere, especially another Metroid game, because she should be the voice of Samus, and you can fight me if you think otherwise. But I say this because there are a lot of positives that Other M did, and for Nintendo to forget the existence of it, or to say they won't make another game of that style, is just disenfranchising the fans who would like to see that style be more examined. Yes, you can have the more action-driven 2D style games or the Prime series. Those can work side and side and they can coexist with one another. But for us that got hit with something that we thought was a good idea, should we have that voice as well? Can a Metroid series of that style coexist with the other styles of Metroid games that we have so far? I think the drastic genre shift caught a lot off guard, and they didn't expect for a game that depended on speedruns and non-linear exploration to go all Metal Gear Solid on us. There are some people that like both those franchises, and I think for those people, there's room for maybe a director's cut of Other M that focuses on changing a few things up and letting the devs tell the story of the bottle ship the way they want to without any disk space or any ESRB rating holding them back. Or, dare I say it, even an Other M 2, a sequel to the controversial game that does other experimental things to change up the Metroid formula. Hell, Metal Gear Rising changed up the formula a great deal from the MGS games, and that is given praise as well. And if you want to go more into the Metal Gear Solid comparison, MGS 2 nowadays is looked at as a game with a story that was made well ahead of its time in the world, and the controversial moves that the game made are something that are praised today. But I think the problem Other M has in comparison with that is that social media wasn't around during the days that MGS 2 was out. So people were free to change their viewpoints over time on that game, and they didn't get bombarded with downvotes or being ratioed, is that the word kids are using nowadays, by mobs that didn't know when to let go that the game existed. Not to mention, by the time Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook did come around, Metal Gear had given us enough games that changed our opinion on Raiden and the Patriots that we had all but completely shifted our opinion on MGS2. So the viewpoints were allowed to become more mixed. And no mob that told you you had to hate MGS2 in order to be accepted took form. Not so here. I have never really seen a game be as polarizing for all the wrong reasons as Other M has been. Even when you disagree with MGS2 being a good story, you can still be friends with the person who disliked the game, and they weren't gatekeeping on the basis that you had to hate the game in order to be accepted as a true fan of the franchise. Doesn't seem to be so with Other M right now, where the social media landscape changed so you can never have a chance to change your view, or never had a chance in order to think for yourself about the game, or where the liking of a game or system made someone block you on social media. Now you are forced to take the stance of the majority or be ratioed. There's that word again. You are bombarded by people who either never played the game or trying to get their internet ratio up by going with the grain. In fact, it's only now that the opinion of Other M is pivoting slightly into where the game is a bit more appreciated for the mission is set out to accomplish, even if it didn't hit the bullseye, and even then I think it got close enough to it. But even then, there is some gatekeeping going on to where some people believe that you have to hate Other M to be accepted as a true Metroid fan, and that should not be. They believe that their opinion of Metroid Other M being bad is an objective viewpoint, one that is factual and not just their opinion. Perhaps it was released during the time from when our viewpoints on acceptable female representation of games were starting to shift to what we see now, but that should only strengthen the viewpoint of Samus and Other M, because should a focus be on showing females being able to overcome weakness and showing strength in that matter, I think that would be extremely progressive. So I beg for Nintendo to not only acknowledge that they made Other M and to own it, but to also be proud of it, because they should be, and to also throw us people who like that style of Metroid gameplay a bone. They should tell the trolls and the Prime babies they shouldn't be hating on the game so much that they have to convince themselves they do so by going all over the internet and telling all of us how much they hate it. And I'm not knocking on the Prime fans, by the way, but you have to admit we got very spoiled by those games. Some of us too spoiled. They shouldn't forget that a lot of Metroid fans did at least like some of the Other M parts, if not all of them. And yes, there are legitimate reasons why some people might think the game wasn't perfect, but it wasn't a terrible game by any stretch. It was no masterpiece, but it wasn't no Last of Us 2 or Mass Effect Andromeda by any stretch of imagination. I mean, you have to admit, Metroid Other M is still way better, even if you were the most hardened Metroid Other M hater, than some of the games we're getting nowadays. And a line of Metroid games that are more of the Metal Gear Solid meets Battlestar Galactica model of storytelling than the pure horror, alien-like style could coexist with one another. That could make all the Metroid fans happy, and who knows what could happen when, not if, people who like one style of Metroid game ends up crossing over and takes a chance on another style. Perhaps that will change a lot of perceptions. And besides, if we're still talking about Metroid Other M 10 years after its release, don't you think it must have done something right? The name's Shady Shadow, and yes, that just happened.